Bismillah, Bismillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yeah, no problem. You guys can hear me like this, right? Like I can sit back and still picks it up, inshallah. Start in a moment. Raise your hand if you're under 18. Doesn't have to be a big raise. Okay. Okay, if you're under 18, I'm going to ask you to tell me your name. I'm going to ask you to tell me where you go to school. And I'm going to ask you to tell me where your parents were born. It's the best you know. Okay. The sisters, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. We'll make you guys do it. The boys, you have to do it, or else we're going to, shame you and make you feel bad about it. Okay. Just quick, okay? My name's this. I'm this year. I go to school. My parents are born here. Just quick, okay? So just get in your mind now so you're ready when I call you. Can I see this? Oh, look at that. And we'll probably go right to left based on my rights, because it's the sunnah to go right to left of things. So we'll probably start with you once we get started. So, ready? Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, you always have to do this twice, to get people to really give a return of the salam that feels good, and you want it to feel good. And, sometimes it's like we're not ready to say it, because it's like in a part of our life we say that to some people, and then in another part of our life we don't say that to people when we greet them, because that's the nature of living in American society, because most of the people you're around are not Muslim. So I'm going to try it again, and then I want you guys to give me a little bit more enthusiastic. Wa alaikum assalam. Okay? Assalamu alaikum. Okay, jazakallah khair. That's pretty good. So I'd like to thank everyone for being here. This is a program about being Muslim in public schools, is the title. So mashallah, we have lots of young people. I'm glad that there's some older people here as well, who I'm going to assume are parents, because a lot of what we'll talk about might relate to parents as much as it does to young people. This is kind of a unique program. Okay, I live here in Minnesota. I'm from Minnesota, like most of you. I've been traveling around to different Muslim communities quite a bit the last couple years in America, and I do work with school districts across America as well. The situation of Muslim kids in public school is kind of a unique thing. And it's sort of rare to have a program that specifically talks about kind of what the issues with that are. And then it sort of tries to help kids think about, strategize, and know what to do to really maintain being Muslim in the public school, and not only maintain being Muslim yourself, but position yourself to call other people to Islam too, which you might not do that in school because you have to be well positioned with someone in order to do that. but it is something that you have to keep in mind while you're in school, because it's actually a very important part of growing up in this society, being Muslim, is being able to do that. And of course, the life of the Prophet Muhammad, ﷺ, it creates a roadmap on how you do that. And part of emulating his character is so you can live out that roadmap that he left. So firstly, while we're here, put your hand up slightly in the air if you are under 18 and you have a phone on you. Put your hand up slightly. Okay, please do me a favor. Take that phone out right now. Put it on Do Not Disturb, and you will not miss anything. Okay, I mean, I'm sure something exciting will happen on Snapchat while we're here. It will, but you'll be able to catch up to it later. It'll be fine. Okay? You know, also too, like while I'm talking, because I'm a public school teacher. Okay, I've been teaching in public schools I've been a teacher for 16 years. So I'm very, very used to talking in front of young people, especially teenagers, because I've been teaching high school my last 8 years. A little strategy that good teachers learn to get kids to listen to you is that when you're talking to them and they start talking to the side, and this is how all misbehavior in school begins if you don't know this. The teacher's talking, and then one student turns to the side because they got something clever or something funny or something they want to say to their neighbor who's sitting next to them. As a teacher, and this is good advice for the rest of you adults to know, if you're ever talking to kids, what you are supposed to do when a kid does that is you stop your talking. You stop completely. And then everyone notices that you stopped. And then everyone starts wondering, well, why did the teacher stop? And then people start looking around, they realize, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so are talking, and that's why the teacher stopped. And it's kind of a way that you call attention to the fact that students aren't paying attention, but you don't have to like make a big deal out of it. So I'm like trained, it's like in my bones that if I'm talking in front of a group of people, especially young kids, and you start talking to the side, I'm gonna stop. And I'll have to stop until you're back paying attention. So I ask, please, that you just try to pay his best attention. I won't talk to you for too long. And keep your head into what I'm saying. I drove about 45 minutes to get here. I live all the way on the other side of the Twin Cities. Some parents really worked and organized to put this together. So a lot's going on to actually bring this here. So you might not know me. You might not have any good reason in your mind to listen to me. But it is the respectful thing to do to listen to me. And it'd be wasting the work of a lot of people if you don't do that. Okay, so really quickly as we can, I want to get a feel for where you guys go to school, what your name is. I won't remember your name. I'm too old to do that well now. But, you know, I'm going to be here like 7 times over the summer, inshallah. And I do want to know your name and know you as best as I can. And I hope that you all come continually. So I won't remember your name next time when I'm here the first time. Maybe I will, but probably not. But I got to at least hear it the first time. So tell me, we're going to go right to left. Like I said, the sisters, you can just pass if you want to. And just tell me your name, where you go to school, and where your parents were born. Okay? Starting with you. This guy right here. And that's at Minneapolis Public Schools, people don't know. Well, we're going to skip. Go ahead. Do you know what district East Middle School's in? It's in Whiteside? Okay. start with you. Yeah, go ahead. If you can just say pass if you don't want to. Okay. Go ahead. You can pass if you want. Pastor. Okay. Okay, thanks everyone for introducing you. Like I said, I won't remember your names, but I'll do my best, okay? So a lot of Wayzata, which I think we're in Wayzata Public Schools district. So my name's Michael. My last name is Abraham. I graduated from Apple Valley School District. Have you guys ever been on a field trip to the zoo? The Minnesota State Zoo? Did you know there is actually a high school at that zoo? Did you know that? There is a high school at that zoo. When you enter that zoo, there's this long road you go down, and to get to the zoo, you go left. No one knows what there is when you go right. If you go right, there's a high school. It's called the School of Environmental Studies in Apple Valley. That's where I went to high school, actually, and I graduated from there. My parents were born in New York, and my great-grandparents were born in Syria. So I have some Arab ancestry. But my parents were not Muslim. My father was an Orthodox Christian. My mother was Catholic. And I came into Islam in 2007. Why? Because I was studying, I was actually studying the Muslim world and the Arab world, because you guys, all of you who spoke are the children of immigrants, because none of you said that your parents were born in the United States. All of you are the children of immigrants. So I am the great-grandchild of immigrants. I'm not the child of immigrants. So for me, growing up being Arab in Minnesota, most people in Minnesota are not Arab, and especially when I was growing up, because most Muslim Arab immigration and most Arab immigration in Minnesota, it happened from the year 2000 to 2010. That was actually the largest decade of immigration period in the United States, and definitely the largest period of Muslim immigration. And most of you, your parents probably came during that time, or maybe a little after, or you have family members who came after that time. Now, when you get from my great-grandfather to my grandfather and to my father to me, here I am living, and I was Arab growing up, but I had no idea what it meant to be Arab. And I really, aside from some of the food that my dad would eat, pretty much had no connection to being Arab whatsoever. So I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened. You guys know what 9/11 is? You've heard of 9/11? Okay. So, part of what I want to do in this series of classes is really give you guys a sense of where you exist in history, because you're pretty unique being the children of immigrant Muslims in America at this point in history. 9/11 was a big change for Muslims and Arabs in the United States. So after 9/11 happened, and there I was as the only Arab kid in my school, it was kind of like a funny thing, because everyone knew that Arabs did it. That's what they were hearing everywhere. So it's like, oh, you, Michael, the one Arab kid, like, what are you, a terrorist, that type of stuff, or whatever. Okay, it wasn't that bad, but it was a little bad. But it made me curious to know about what was going on in that part of the world. And I went through a similar thing when I was younger. In 1991, the United States went to war with Iraq in Kuwait, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Saddam Hussein was the leader of Iraq. And I can remember seeing Syria on the map next to Iraq. That was really the first time I'd ever seen it on a map. So I was studying like history and the politics of the Muslim world at the University of Minnesota as a non-Muslim. And then through that, I learned a little bit about Islam from the university, but you actually don't learn the religion too well from American universities. And because I was getting curious about it, I went to some bookstores on Cedar Riverside over there, where there was Somali immigrants. Walked into a bookstore, told him I wanted to get a translation of the Quran. I remember he didn't have any out. The guy running the bookstore, he had to go in the back, get a box out, bust it out, and sold me a translation of the Quran. That was in June of 2007. And I went home, read that, and really didn't get too far into it before I knew that I wanted to become a Muslim. And then I took my Shahada that September. So I've been Muslim for 18 years now. So I kind of started with this, like, studying Muslims before I became a Muslim. And then after becoming a Muslim, I've both been with the Muslims, but also kind of continued learning and then teaching people about Muslims in professional fields. So I got into education. I went to Saudi Arabia in 2010, spent 3 years there. I worked at a school in Saudi that was all Saudi kids going to it, but they were trying to study an American curriculum, to whatever extent you can say there's an American curriculum. And I was there for 3 years, then I came back and I joined the public school system here, and I've been teaching there ever since. About 7 years ago, I created a training program for non-Muslim teachers called Engaging Muslim Students in Public Schools. And then I wrote a book about it. So for 7 years, I've been teaching teachers a lot here in Minnesota, including from the school districts that you guys go to, and also around the country, about Islam, about the religious practice of Muslims, and about kind of the situation of Muslim kids in school, and the things that are difficult for parents especially. Because when I first got into the community in 2007, I moved next to this masjid. You might know Darul Farouk in Bloomington. You ever been there? Never been there. Everyone knows Darul Farouk in Bloomington. It used to be in Minneapolis. It used to be near the University of Minnesota campus. Next to the University of Minnesota campus, there's a small neighborhood they call Dinkytown. Next to Dinkytown, there's a street that they call Como Avenue. It used to be there. There's still a masjid there. And I actually lived in the house next to it because the masjid owned it. After it became Muslim, they let me move into it. And I would help out at the weekend schools there. I would attend the classes in the evenings and stuff with the kids. And like parents' worry about the kids in school was really present at that time. And even working at schools, I worked at schools that was all Mexican kids. So all kids who are children of immigrants, but not Muslims. It's a difficult thing to be the parents of immigrants, to pick up your life, come to a whole new country, whole new culture, everything's a whole new system, and then send your kids to school. And they really want kids to do well in school. Because in general, the better you do at school, what's going to happen? The better you'll do in life, better you're going to be set up to get a job. And especially, too, a lot of times when immigrants come to this country, they come for economic reasons. What do I mean by economic reasons? Economics has to do with what? Has to do with money. So immigrants, they come here because they're trying to get money themselves to raise their standard of living. They're maybe going to send money back home to help people back home who don't have as much opportunity to get money. Maybe something happened back home that made it so it was pretty much impossible for them to get money there, so now that they have to come here. So for immigrant parents, it's difficult because in general, your parents, they want to be cooperative with the school. They usually come from a place back home where what you told kids was, be good, listen to the teacher when you go to school, and you should do that. And everyone just kind of helped out with that, and the kids would go to school, the kids would do their studying, and everything worked out fine. And then they try to do the same thing here. They try to do the same thing here, and for the most part, that works. because in general, the children of immigrants, they usually do pretty good in school. There's actually a lot of research that shows that the children of immigrants, on average, they do better than the children of non-immigrants. And there's different reasons for that, but the main one is usually because their parents come from a culture that really valued education, that really valued hard work, and really valued self-discipline. What does self-discipline mean? Self-discipline means controlling yourself to meet your responsibilities, even when there's something fun that you want to do. Even when there's something that you rather do, you put that to the side to meet your responsibilities. So school is meant to instill that in kids. You have to practice that to do well in school, and immigrants really want that for their kids. Now, what happens, what a lot of families are finding, is their kids might go to school, they might even do well, they might get really good grades, get all A's even, graduate, get into a good college, but when the kid comes, by the time the kid's done with school here, it's like they don't even know who the kid is. Or the kid is acting in some kind of way, or the kid is telling them this or telling them that the parent is like overwhelmed by, or they can't even make sense of. And then it leaves them wondering, like, what was going on all this time I was sending my kid to school that made this big change? And that is especially difficult for Muslims. That's especially difficult for Muslim parents, because Muslim parents, the religion gives them some specific ways in which they want their kids to turn out. It doesn't have to be like down to so much detail, but there's rules in the religion. There's good rules, healthy rules, and there's boundaries that you're not supposed to cross in the religion. And in general, parents want their kids to stay within those boundaries. And they find a lot that they go through school, they might do well in school, but sometimes they come out of it, and the kids have all types of issues with these boundaries and all kinds of trouble with these boundaries and this type of thing. Why is that? Well, back home, where your parents came from, in general, the culture and the society, the way people treat kids, the way people parent, it's more done in a group type fashion. Okay, it's what is called in academics, it's more collective. Whereas American society is very, very individualistic. That is like the central value of being in American society. Okay, in American society, everyone's an individual. People should identify individually. And the implication of that, and what is explicitly said sometimes with that, is that then people should just be allowed to do whatever they want individually. And even it becomes something where the main goal of living itself is just to do what you want individually and to follow what your heart desires, as they might say. In a more group-oriented society, in a more collective society that values family more, that values community more, that value on being an individual is not there so much. So a lot of times the parents, they end up coming to this country and they raise kids, and the habits that they have as parents, it's from a different societal structure. It's from a whole different culture where everything's more collective. I don't have to worry about making my kid understand why he should do this and should not do that, because just everybody doesn't do that, and everybody does do this. So when my kid leaves the door in the morning, if the neighbor sees him and he's doing something wrong, the neighbor's going to tell him. If he goes to school, he's doing something I don't want him to do as a Muslim or as a member of this country, the teacher's going to tell him not to do it also. And the other kids he goes to school with or she goes to school with, if they start getting out of line, they start doing what we don't want them to do, well, then the other kids will get them back in line too, or the parents of the other kids will get them back in line too, because everyone's reinforcing the same thing and everyone's telling you the same thing. Here it doesn't work that way. youth culture in America is not based on that. Youth culture in America, it's not based on obligation to community. It's not based on obligation to family. It's not even based on obligation to the nation anymore. It used to be. When I was growing up, I was at the tail end of that's what it used to be about. It's not about any of those things. What is youth culture in America about? What is youth culture in America about? Don't worry, I am asking it rhetorically, meaning I'm asking it, someone asks a question rhetorically, it means they're not asking and expecting you to answer. They're just asking so you start thinking about it. Youth culture in America is based upon entertainment and fun. That is what it is about. And it's been that way for a very, very long time. It's been that way since my parents were parents. Maybe it's even been that way since my grandparents were, or since my parents were kids, I'm sorry. And my parents are almost 70. It wasn't quite that way, but it was starting to become that way when my grandparents were kids, but my grandfather, he did serve in World War II, and you had to have kind of this idea of self-sacrificing in order to do that. But when you are living here and for somewhere from 70 to really almost 100 years, the culture of youth is based on fun and entertainment, it ends up being the case that almost the whole society is based off of fun and entertainment. And if you look into people's lives, you look outside this community, you get to know people, you will find that is the thing that most people are striving for. They have a job, they have a career, they have things they're trying to do. What they're mostly trying to do is to get that stuff done, oftentimes get that stuff done with as little work as possible so that they can go entertain themselves. Because they were raised and conditioned in a way where that was the goal of everything, was to entertain yourself. Now, if you take that, you take growing up in a society where that is how the young people are conditioned, and then you compare it to Islam. Does that work with what Islam teaches? Does just striving for entertainment, does just trying to have as much fun as possible in life, does that work with Islam? You can nod if you think yes, you can shake your head if you think no. Does that work with Islam? It doesn't. Okay, it doesn't. Now, Islam doesn't take fun away from you completely, but it sets boundaries upon it. And Islam, well, actually, I'll get a little bit later into why I became a Muslim. I'll talk a little bit about that. What I want to get into actually is why youth culture in America, why does it revolve around fun so much? Why does it revolve around fun? Why is it all about fun? Why is that all that kids care about? Why is that the thing that kids are always looking for? Okay, if you look at kids in school, see kids in school, anything that they're asked to do by the school, their teachers, anything they're doing with one another, the first question they ask themselves is this boring or is it fun? And if it's boring, they'll start complaining about it. If it's fun, they might like it. Why is it that way? It wasn't that way where your parents grew up. It wasn't even this way in this society for most of its history. Hasn't been that way really in most places through most of history. Why is it? The reason is money. Okay, the reason is money. You guys looking at you, okay, we got a wide age range. You're maybe 6 to 18 here or so, 6 to 17. You have to understand that your minds are valuable. Your minds are worth money. They're worth money in a good way and in a bad way. They're worth money in a good way in that you can use your mind to put it towards something productive that does some good for some people and gives them something that they're willing to give you money for. And through that, you can help other people. That's a good way. But your mind is worth money in a bad way in that people who want to make money, if they can get control of your minds right now, people want to make money, then they can use your mind to constantly make more money for themselves throughout time. And there is no easier time to get a hold of someone's mind than from ages 12 to 25. From ages 12 to 25. You know why? It's because from age 12 to 25, your brain literally goes through more changes than at any other time period in your life. You think about a baby. You've seen a newborn baby, seen a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old. Their minds change a lot. They go from literally being able to do nothing but crying to crawling, rolling over, walking, speaking, all within a few years. There's lots of changes that go on in their brain with that. Even with that, there is more change in the human brain. I mean, its physical makeup from age 12 to 25, more so than any other time. And psychologists have studied this very, very closely. And they have studied this age range very, very closely. And neurologists, a neurologist is someone who studies the science of the brain. They've studied this age very, very closely, and in recent years, the last 20, 30 years, the chemical makeup of the brain, the electrical activity of the brain, there's technology that enables people to track it and know what's going on with it more so than ever before. What goes on with your brain from age 12 to 25 creates certain behavior tendencies in people who are teenagers and even in their early 20s that are very, very predictable. They're very predictable. And because those behavior patterns are predictable, they can be taken advantage of. What are the main behavior patterns that are predictable for teenagers? The main thing is teenagers, when they make decisions, are teenagers generally good at making decisions? Those of you who are teenagers, go to middle and high school, what do you think? Are teenagers generally good at making decisions? You can nod if yes, shake your head if no. Yeah, everyone says no, and knows the right answer. You gotta be kidding me. No, they're not. Why? Okay, teenagers have when you make a decision about something, you want the decision to make sense. You want it to produce a good outcome. Teenagers don't do that well. Why? It's because of their brain chemistry. Because in teenagers' brain chemistry, there's some things going on that make it so teenagers, when they make a decision, what they put a high priority on, meaning the things they really want to do, things they really want to be involved in, are things that are new, things that are exciting, things that are thrilling. And oftentimes that means things that are risky, things that have risk. Meaning meaning that if you do it, there's a chance something negative is going to happen. And when they think about decision making, teenagers, they downplay risk because of that. The possible negative consequences that could come from doing some action. their minds have a way of putting that to the side. Or their minds have a way of telling themselves that negative thing, it's really not going to be so bad, as a way to excuse themselves to do the fun thing, or to do the new thing, or to do the thrilling thing. And there's specific chemical reasons in a teenager's brain why that is. And I don't want to get too technical about it, but some of you, I think, probably understand science fairly well, because I'm sure you're good students. I'm sure you learned some things in science. It has to do, and for the benefit of the adults, so you understand this too, actually, this has to do with the need for dopamine in a teenager's minds. So the big development that is going on in a teenager's mind from 12 to 25 is the different regions of the brain are becoming more interconnected. And when that happens, the actual nerves of the brain through which electrical activity passes, a new coating is put over those nerves, which is called myelin. So this process, it's called myelination. For myelin to form, you need dopamine. Your brain has to produce dopamine. What causes your brain to produce dopamine? Things that are fun, things that are exciting, things that are new, and things that are thrilling. So teenagers' minds, their psychology, it actually craves fun and it craves new experience because of that. And they will rationalize that it's worth it to take a risk on something if it means that something fun is going to happen. And it makes it so they absolutely hate being bored. And there's nothing that young people complain about more, especially in this society, than being bored. They absolutely hate it. Because they need that thrill to produce dopamine more. So, did you guys learn this in school? Have you learned this in school? You've learned about this? Good. You learned about this? Any of you in middle and high school learned about this in school before? Okay. Some schools, they're active in teaching kids about this to try to not get kids to, because if you can understand this, you can make less risky decisions. You can't control yourself completely when you're young, because it's hard when you're young for your reasoning to overtake your emotions. But if you understand the way that your mind and teenagers' minds tend to work, you can start to override this. This phenomenon specifically is used to take advantage of young people by the entertainment industry specifically. Meaning the people who make TV shows, the people who make movies, the people who make music, and certainly nowadays the people who run social media companies. No one looks into this stuff more than them. And the people who are successful on social media. They all understand this. Teenage minds, they crave stimulation. Because your minds are changing so much and you need this specific chemical, it craves stimulation. So what that ends up making it is for the entertainment industry and for the social media companies, it makes sense for them to try to get a whole ton of things in kids' minds and in kids' eyes that goes against whatever their parents have been telling them growing up. Why? Because what your parents have been telling you growing up, what your parents have been telling you to do every day growing up, what your parents have been wanting you to do every day growing up, that's going to seem boring to you. That's going to seem boring because you've been getting that your whole life. So then the entertainment industry comes along, the social media industry comes along, and they try to feed and put into the minds of young people ideas, ways of talking, ways of thinking, ways of behaving that is completely different than what their parents asked them to. Why do they do it? Because they know it's going to draw your attention. And your attention and your mind, it's worth money. And that's all they want from you. And also, too, the other group of people who really want to get a hold of teenagers as well is drug dealers. Why? Because most drugs, they will artificially give your mind a whole lot of dopamine. And it will actually condition your mind so your mind can't produce dopamine anymore. So then you will need drugs in order to produce it. That is why teenagers and people aged 12 to 25, they are the people who are most likely to fall into addiction, drug addiction specifically. And that is why there's all kinds of music out there that makes drug addiction look cool. That is why there's all kinds of music out there that makes the violence that comes along with the drug trade and all that type of stuff look cool. That's why it exists. To take advantage of your minds and get a hold of your minds from a young age. Now, if you compare that to what your parents tell you to do, what they want you to do, what's better for you? What your parents want or what the entertainment industry wants for you? What's better? The parents or the entertainment industry? Which is better? Go ahead, say it. I know it's not always comfortable to like say it in front of each other. Okay, just go ahead and say it. Okay? Yeah, good. So everyone's smart enough to know that. So, this whole challenge that your parents deal with, it's very, very difficult for them. Because it wasn't so like this where they're growing up. I mean, the Muslim world will become more like this. It is becoming more like this. But their parents didn't have to deal with all this competition for their own minds when they were growing up. So they didn't have to worry about this stuff so much. And how does it really affect public schools? It affects public schools because the culture of young people, I know what goes on in schools because I spend all day in them. Most kids, their minds while they are in school, it's not really about the subject that they're learning. Their minds are not occupied with what the teacher is saying. Their minds are not occupied with reading, science, math, all that type of stuff. Their minds aren't occupied with that. What they're thinking about is what other kids are doing. And they're thinking about what other kids are talking about. And they're thinking about what other kids think of them. Even when they're sitting in front of the teacher talking. That is usually what they're thinking about. That is what dominates kids' minds while they're in school. And then what dominates their minds is, in general, the social culture of the kids in school. And what dominates the social culture of kids in school? It's the entertainment industry. And whatever kids are looking at through media. Why? Because especially the kids who they come from families that are not as loving. They come from families where maybe they don't have both parents at home. They come from families where they feel neglected. There are some kids in the school always who are like that. They don't feel like they get enough attention at home. They might not know that themselves. But because they have not gotten enough attention at home, they go to school and they want attention from people. And especially if their personality is a little more extroverted, what they will do is they will look at these screens all day. They'll look at whatever so-and-so is saying, whoever's got this amount of likes, this amount of views, whatever they're saying, whatever they're talking about, well, they got all kinds of attention there. And that attention looks really good to them. Not only because it's made to look like something valuable on the screen, but for some kids, they don't have enough attention and enough care at home. So then they go to school and they want attention from everybody else. And what they do is they imitate what they see on those screens. And they repeat what they hear in the music. And they often do it in a very loud way. And they often do it in a way that pressures other kids to do it. And because inside themselves they don't feel good while they're doing that, they might act like they feel good. They're trying to make their self feel good, which means they're trying to make their ego feel good. So their ego might get really big as they act out what they see on these screens at school. Because they don't actually feel good inside themselves, when someone else challenges what they are doing, they will put that person down. So if someone is there imitating what they've seen in TikTok, music videos, whatever, someone's there imitating that, and one of you says to them, you're acting stupid. You're just imitating what you saw there. They will hit you back with something. They'll try to make you feel bad, and they will try to make you feel like you're a loser, or you're lame, or you're this, or you're that, or that type of thing. Really, anyone who tries to reinforce what parents tell their kids to do in school, they're going to get that back from a lot of kids. Because there's some kids, their emotionally dependent on seeking attention in this way. And those kids usually have the biggest influence over what everyone is talking about in school and what the general culture of is at school. So then when you're at school, I mean, how many hours a week do you spend in school? You spend 6 a day. How many a week? Yeah, 30. Somewhere from 30 to 40. How many days a year are you in school? I don't think it's 200 in YZ. It's usually 180. Okay, so what is that? 30 hours times 180? What are you talking about? 4,000 hours a year in school? So it's a lot of time. And the dilemma that kids are faced with is if you do things that are going to make you stick out in a negative way, where other kids are going to say this or that, or other kids are going to pressure you to do this and that, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. It's going to feel lonely. It's going to feel uncomfortable. And you're going to have to deal with accusations and all this type of thing. So then it becomes something very emotionally difficult even for the kid who doesn't want to partake in that type of stuff. And it is a very difficult situation for Muslim children to be in, because the reality is, if you want to exhibit the character of a Muslim, you want to act in a modest way, you want to not swear, you want to pray every day, you want to not listen to music and not talk about music, all that type of stuff. It's going to feel like you're going to be made to feel like you're some sort of weird person while you're there. And then for your parents, who didn't have to grow up in that real type of situation, certainly not as difficult as it is here, they oftentimes don't know how to coach you guys through that. So that's what this is all about, being here, is to kind of name this thing that is going on with Muslim kids. Because the reality is, too, also, your minds being different. What time is it? Okay, I want you guys to stand up for 1 minute. Just stand up for 1 minute and shake your legs out and stuff. Okay, the adults, you don't have to understand. Your knees might be bad. My knees are bad too, but the young people, just stand up for a minute. Okay? And I'll have you sit down, just get your energy out a little bit. Okay, 30 more seconds and sit back down. We'll break, and I think there's some snacks or something in a little bit, but we're not quite there yet. 30 more seconds. You sit down. "15 seconds. 10 seconds. You should start getting seated down again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Sit, please. If you're not sitting now, you should be sitting. Go ahead. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll start talking again when we're all seated. I get a little distracted if people are up and moving around and everything. If you are seated, please just wait patiently. Don't get a conversation going. I won't go too much longer before we'll break for snacks or something. I think there's snacks. And then we'll come back and the parents can ask questions. Kids, if you have any questions, it is good to ask. I know you're going to be a little shy in front of one another to ask, but it is good to ask. Okay, take a seat, please. Big thing to summarize everything I just said. I know I talked a while. As young people in America, if you're talking, I honestly get distracted, so if someone's talking, understand, it's a social time, that type of thing, but do please be quiet, okay? Because what I have to say is actually important. It is very important, okay? What you guys need to understand as young people in America, especially as teenagers, whether you're that age or you come upon that age, people are trying to manipulate you. They're trying to use your brain for cash. Don't be a slave to someone else. It's really better to not just give your mind over to someone else so they can use it for money. And especially, too, it will take you away from every type of Islamic behavior. And a problem that the parents have had, and something that the parents have failed in, Muslim parents in this country, all over, they haven't made the Islamic behaviors seem like something empowering to the kids. The kids, because your mind is so conditioned to want fun, and then every single aspect of the society outside your family and outside the religion is trying to stimulate young people into just wanting fun. Kids who grow up in religious families, what they experience religious rules as when they become teenagers is, well, this is just a bunch of stuff trying to stop me from having fun. That's all this is doing. And teenagers, they are very good at being one person in one place and an entirely different person in another place. Part of that is because of how their brains are. The physical material of a teenager's mind, it's literally more flexible than an older person's. The older you are, literally, the more stiff your mind is. So older people, they're more stuck in their habits. And I'm saying this for the benefit of the parents themselves. So it's very common, kids from religious families, they act religious in one context. They might act religious at home. They will act religious at the masjid, a little bit at least. And then when they go to school, they're acting an entirely different way. Not because they're thinking that they want to be evil, not because they're thinking that they want mom and dad to not like them or disrespect them, but they're just kind of reacting to the environment, and they can do that very, very easily. And what happens to Muslim young people when they grow up here is they end up living like two lives. Okay, they have their lives around their peers going through school where they act one way, talk about this, talk about that, like it's all just cool and that type of thing. And then they have their way that they act with their family and the religious community, which gradually becomes less and less. Because as they get older, they stop going to the weekend schools. or they stop coming to things like this. They stop being around the parents so much as they're getting involved in all these activities. So they grow up kind of being two different people in two different places, and they get to a point when they become young adults where their mind, it's not able to do that anymore because it doesn't have this easy flexibility that teenage minds have. And then they have a mental health crisis. And that's why we have so many young people in our community, ages 25 to 35, who grew up here for the better part of their life, and they're going through mental health crises and this type of thing. Because they lived this way growing up, where they didn't have a consistency between one place and another. So for you guys, the initial purpose of this session is to name this phenomenon and for you to understand this is going on. What you have to understand to motivate yourself to not want fun so much and to not give into the fun thing or that everyone is talking about at school, you have to want Islam for those other people. The non-Muslims that you go to school with and the non-Muslims who are outside this building, if you don't want Islam for them, you're just going to give in to them and you're going to become like them. That is what will happen. That's what happens to everybody. Islam is what you have to offer those people. I know you're going to grow up caring about those people. You don't spend 4,000 hours a year around this person and that person, but that you develop some sort of care about them. At the very least, you'll care what they think. And that's the whole thing. Your parents didn't really have a way of navigating you through. Because if they grew up in a society that was majority Muslim, okay, in the case of Somalia, 100% Muslim, mashallah, they didn't grow up with this dynamic where they had people who they really cared about when they were younger, but they were non-Muslim. And the Muslim community in general needs to think about what it means for us to care about the non-Muslims. Because we want things from them. We want the jobs that they have to offer. Families, they came to this country thinking they want the education that the non-Muslims are going to bring, that there's some sort of secret about it that's made the West so successful, or something like that. So what do we have to offer them? We can be their employees. We can be students at their public schools, which helps keep them having jobs for the people who work in it. But what is the real thing that we have to offer them? Islam is the thing that you have to offer the non-Muslims, and it's the thing that they need. Because they are all over mental health crises too. Look at this gathering. Look at this. How many people are in this room right now? MashaAllah, like this guy goes and counts. That's the way to do it, man. Thank you. What do you estimate, my guy? How many do you think? Just estimate. Yeah, I was going to say about 56 too. Okay. Do you think non-Muslims, do you think if we go to Joe Schmo, whoever in the neighborhood over here, non-Muslim, knock on his, do you think he just has some place that he can go to and gather with 60 people tonight? Not only gather with them, but pray with them, share food with them? Do you think that the average non-Muslim in this society has that? They don't have that. They don't have that. There was a book written in the year 2002 by a professor from Harvard, okay, the best university in the country. It's called Bowling Alone. You know what bowling is, right? Okay, bowling. It's called Bowling Alone. Why is it called that? What is that book about? It's about how Americans don't have community anymore. And it's called that because in the 1950s, 40s, 30s, bowling was very popular. But it was all done in groups. It was all done in group leagues. So if you go through the roles of people who book to go bowling at the bowling alleys, it's all through group organizations that people belong to. And things like men's groups, women's groups, they used to be very, church groups, all that type of stuff, used to be very, very common in the society for everyone to belong to something like that. But by the turn of the century, The vast majority of people who registered for bowling, they just did it as individuals, not as part of some group. And the same phenomenon was found with things all over the society. And the author of that book predicted that this century would see a mental health crisis in American society because people don't have community. And now 24 years later, 22 years later, after he published that book, look what's happened. And everyone's all concerned about mental health and the mental health crises. And you see signs of it all over the society. This was before the iPhone was invented. This is before everyone was concerned about screen addiction causing mental health. Kind reminder, if you have a phone, please keep it put away and put on Do Not Disturb. I know it's difficult. I'm in the habit of checking my phone every 5 minutes too, but kind reminder, please. It's really not appropriate behavior for the masjid also. So, guys, going back to why I became Muslim, maybe you're interested in it, maybe you're not. Me, I was studying like politics, like trying to figure out what are the problems in, society and how do you solve them. And I found Islam through that, because Islam does have the solutions. Has the solutions for a society, has the solutions for a family, has the solutions for an individual. If someone just follows it, imagine that every person on earth woke up tomorrow and everything that Islam commands of a person, they did. And everything that Islam forbids of a person, they didn't do. Just imagine everyone on earth woke up tomorrow and did that. Just imagine. You would have peace on earth. So people, they want to talk about social justice, they want to talk about peace, they want to talk about this and that. As Muslims, you have the actual solution with you. You have to accept this reality and get a hold of it. And if you come to the country, or your parents come to the country, and you take from the economy, you take from the school system, you're nice with people, you have relationships with people, as colleagues, whatever, but then you fail to offer them the most valuable thing that you have to offer them, what are you really doing? Someone would not be wrong if they said you're taking advantage of the society, because you're asking for something for it economically. You're asking for money, you're asking for material advancement by partaking in it. And then if Islam is something that's just kept hidden, we just keep it in here, then really we're not being nice to those people, even if we put on a smiling face. Even if we say good morning in a nice way, even if we give them tea, whatever, and we're good workers, whatever, we're really not being nice to them if we hide that thing from them. Now, for the immigrant parents, I don't blame them, because it's very, very difficult to come to a new country where you don't know the culture, where you speak with an accent, where the country already has a very strong bias against immigrants in general, and you are maybe dependent on your economic advancement to survive here and for other people to survive back home. It's very difficult. So I don't blame the parents for not inviting people to Islam, not doing more dawah, but for the young people and for the parents to understand, for the young people, being like a good Muslim, like a strong Muslim, it's really not going to survive in the kids if they don't have a sense that they're here to offer Islam to people. And if they had a sense like that, they had a sense that their life was a mission to call people to Islam, then all these restrictions we ask them to practice, specific ways we ask them to dress, specific behaviors, manners, habits we ask them to do, the prayers we ask them to perform every day, if they had that sense of Islam being a mission to give dawah to other people, then practicing those restrictions would feel like something empowering to them. Because then it's no longer something just stopping them from having fun. It's something that is linked to a much greater and larger purpose. And if they experience it as empowering, then this whole need that their minds have for dopamine. That will give them the dopamine rush. So now, when everyone's talking about music, this, that, and other stuff that we're not even going to mention here, because some of you'd throw up if you knew what the kids are talking about at school. Instead of just partaking in it, restricting themselves, it would feel good. It wouldn't feel isolating. And even speaking up against it for those who are brave enough to do it or more extroverted to do it. That would feel like something thrilling and not something scary, because it's linked to like a bigger mission. And instead of filling their time with how much entertainment do I get in the day? How much fun do I have? How much meaningless fun do I have to give myself a little stimulation? Instead of constantly occupying themselves with that, they might occupy themselves with, let's sit around and think about how we educate people about Islam better. Let's strategize about how we hold events, about how we build relationships with people, so they trust us, so they'll listen to us. Because dawah is not a simple thing to do. It's not a simple thing to do. You have to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And we all know that he received wahi, he received revelation at what age? At age 40. So he had a whole life before that. And if you look at his life before that, it is the blueprint for how you position yourselves with people so that they will listen to you when you have a message to give them. Because someone receiving a message, it's really almost as much about how they experience you as a person than anything else. So the Prophet ﷺ, he was known as being very trustworthy. He would not lie, even when it was difficult. Someone would travel, they trusted him to hold on to their dinars, their money. He was like a bank in that way. They would return from their travel, they'd find the coins he would give back to them, they were the same ones. It's not like he used their money for something else and then got some others from somewhere before they came back and then gave it to him. There were the Quraysh. Please listen, okay? I know you have time. I know I'm talking for a while. Okay, you have a chance to talk to one another, but please listen. The Quraysh would have parties. They would have drinking parties where alcohol is served, just like teenagers do around here. They actually don't do it as much as they did when I was a kid. Part of that is from so many immigrants coming here, but the Quraysh would do that, and the Prophet, ﷺ, even before he was a prophet, he would not go to those. They would have festivals where they would worship idols and do lewd things, and he would not go to those. And because he would not participate in those things, people had more respect for him. They might have thought he was weird or he was strange. They knew he was different. It was good for them to know he was different. But because he had principle, he had rules that he was living by, that caused people to respect him. So I recommend to you guys as you're young, really try to cultivate this in your mind and your heart. And for the parents, okay, a lot of parents, they came here, and especially with 9/11 happening, especially with the war on terror happening, which you guys didn't live through, and you don't know what it was like for Muslims at that time. Muslim parents have grown up kind of scared when they've been here. So what has been transmitted to the young people, the young Muslims in America in general, and certainly in this community, what has been transmitted, and what you transmit to young people always happens, I'm talking to the parents now, more by your behavior than by what you say. Always. What's been transmitted to them is, we say that Islam and being Muslim is the most important thing. But in reality, when we go out into society, we keep it hidden and we keep it in a box somewhere. And I'm not saying, I understand where parents are coming from in doing that. I really do empathize. Because as a parent, you have a natural fear for your child. You don't want anything to happen for them. You don't want them to be burdened with the type of friction that takes place between people that comes from being a minority in the country, an immigrant minority, racial minority, and a religious minority. It is all understandable. But for the parents, you need to talk this aspect out with your kids. And you can't deny your kids a cultivation in their hearts and in their minds that what they're really interacting with the non-Muslims for and these institutions for is to call them to Islam and to at least educate them about Islam. And people are open to hearing about it. They're open to it. Okay, if we, the media, everything, the Islamophobia, all that type of stuff, sometimes the Muslim community experiences non-Muslims too much through those avenues. And those, the media will make you paranoid. But you certainly in places like public schools, people really are open-minded. So talking about this aspect for the parents, you have to do this with your kids. You have to talk about your own kind of emotional experience growing up, developing into who you are today. Your kids have to understand that journey that you went through. That will cause them to empathize with you a little bit more and not just see you as someone trying to put restrictions on them and just trying to stop them from having fun. You have to talk about that with them. And for you guys, even though the message of the Muslim community is general, you need to understand the history of where people have come from, why it's been difficult, but you need to understand that you are different because you're growing up here. When have Muslims ever grown up in America in this amount of numbers? When? In all of history, when? Never. Never. So America, it's been making life difficult for the Muslims, and Europe as well, for certainly 200 years now. Could say 1,000 if you want to go all the way back to the Crusades. And really a lot in the last 100 years since World War I. Okay, America has had its business in the Muslim world and making lives difficult for everyone over there. And they still are. And we all see that going on front and center with Israel-Palestine right now. That's been going on for 100 years, all over the Muslim world. For the better part of that, there were not really Muslims in any type of numbers to teach people in the society about Islam. You guys are the first generation of Muslims with the opportunity to do that. And you can choose to either take advantage of that, to take it on as a mission, and to start thinking now about how you can position yourself to call people to Islam. I'm not saying to go out and you got to start talking to kids at school tomorrow or the next day or whatever about it, because it is something you have to strategize about. It's something you have to think about. But it certainly begins with how people perceive your character and how they perceive your behavior. And if you just listen to music like everybody else, you just say the swear words that everybody else says, you talk about all the same things, you take on all the same opinions that people have, no one is going to respect you. They're just going to see you as some fool who's just like everybody else. And you will become like them. That is what will happen. But if you practice this self-discipline, people will make it feel difficult in the beginning. They'll make it feel difficult in the moment, and they might pick on you. That might happen. But if you stay calm, you stay closely connected to the fact that you have a strong purpose in doing this, in the long run, they will actually respect you. And you will find those people who you are friends with, that you have relationships with, when they respect you in that way. Anyone who really respects a practicing Muslim, they eventually come to that person for help with their life issues. That is what eventually happens. And that is the goal that you should be trying to make while you're in school. That should be your central goal, is trying to position yourself so you have this type of respect from the non-Muslims. And doing it is simple, because all you have to do is follow Islam and exhibit good behavior. To say it is simple, but I do know that it's difficult, because your minds are still young. You have to spend all day with those people, and peer pressure is experiencing a very harsh thing. Okay? So, in summary, Young people, thank you guys for listening for so long. I know it's been a while. Understand that all the teenage behavior that you see, it is all something just trying to take advantage of you and manipulate your mind. Know it, accept it. It's the reality. If you can't see it and you can't accept that as a reality, you're kind of a fool. And then take it on right now as something long-term in your life that you want to educate the non-Muslims about Islam. You want to be in a position with them where they will accept that from you. Because if we can't educate the non-Muslims about Islam, how are we going to practice Islam in this society? We're just going to be like constantly hiding it. And that's just gone on for too long. Again, for immigrants, it's hard to do it any other way. But you guys, you're born here, you're grown up, you know the ways and means of the culture. You don't have to do that. And you should take it upon yourself to do that. And parents, you have to not be afraid of that type of idea. Because your kids won't survive as a Muslim. They really won't make it if they don't have that type of idea. Most of them. Okay? I say all this, I ask Allah for forgiveness. Anything good that comes from this comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything wrong that comes from it comes from the evils and deficiencies within myself. I ask Allah to bless all of us. I ask Allah to protect our youth, to purify all our hearts and all our souls. I ask Allah to make us obedient to His religion and to instill love for His religion in us. I ask Him to aid our brothers and sisters in Palestine and Sudan and everywhere else that the Muslims are suffering. I ask Him to make us as part of the solution to those problems. And I bear witness that there's none worthy of worship but Him alone, and I ask Allah for forgiveness. So, is there snacks?
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Brother Michael. Again, we want to welcome everyone, and I know this was a great...
we can do questions and stuff
after the break. So we're going to go take a very light break, and we have very light snacks, so don't expect to become full. I'm sure you guys are going to go have dinner. But in the back, in the dining hall, we're setting up. Give us like 2 minutes. If you can just stay put here. We'll have just slight refreshment and some cookies for the young ones. Boys. So in about 2-3 minutes, we're going to set up, and then you guys can come out. We'll give ourselves about 15 minutes and then come back for Q&A with Brother Michael, inshallah. So we'll call you as soon as we're ready, but give us about 5 minutes.
She has a question for you, brother.
Yes. So in New York City, there used to be two really, really tall buildings called towers. Yeah, so on September 11th, both of those towers hit like when the first one hit, everyone thought it was some accident. And when the second one hit, they believed that had to have happened on purpose. So Muslims got, and then those two towers became destroyed. So this had, like I said, I was 17 when this happened. I was in school and everything shut down. Okay, like stores all closed, everyone was watching the news, things stopped working, the whole society shut down. One paying attention to what was going on. Two, out of fear that the like Americans all thought like something was happening. Now, it turned out Muslims got blamed for this. Muslims from Saudi Arabia said, so then the United States government had to So when that happened, like Muslims became like the enemy of the because they were blamed for destruction of towers, and then the U.S. government went to war into Muslim countries. You understand what I'm saying? And even too, there was a lot less Muslims in here. Okay, like even in Plymouth, like Great Semester did not exist at that time. Most people in this community were not here at that time. So it wasn't like every Muslim kind of or every American were any Muslims against reality. Do you understand? So the Muslims who came here at that time, while they were there, they had to deal with this fact, like this, you know, you can imagine being like you can imagine which way you're doing. So you can imagine from where Pakistan, and Pakistan's for a very nice Afghanistan. So you can imagine being him even in 2005 to a country and everyone was like got their minds all worked up over the country being at war with the country next to the one that came from, and knowing they're at war with Muslims. You understand? So does that make it easy for him to be Muslim here? No, it doesn't. Alhamdulillah, things are getting easier. Do your kids go to Wyzetta? You can. Some people in Wyzetta High School. But I have a training program. You found Wyzetta, it's like you can find meals and and I'll talk a little bit more when we get back. What year did you come?
Which year? Same year.
Talk to me. And I'm gonna say it next. Great. Kids, they're getting it. Maybe you do, but you want to share all that. You know, that's why anthropologists have societies, right? So this one is important. Muslim countries are actually the rules. But Muslim countries are still as they kind of were brought up to talk about their schools here, so that we go to school and selfish, but you know, like they need to be coached. Yeah, I have 3 daughters. 14, 12, and 10.
Assalamu alaikum. We're going to be restarting in about 2 minutes. If we can have the sisters come closer, because the next phase is a Q&A. He wants to have everybody closer this side. So the boys can sit on this side, and this side is for the sisters. So if you can come closer. Sisters in the back. Thank you.
Okay, Bismillah. If you're in the musalla and can take a seat, please, and not talk. I'm a bit of a stickler about that. I apologize, because I know people do like to talk, but I get distracted if people are talking when I'm trying to focus. It's just a habit, because you really can't be a good teacher in a public school if you don't have that habit with you. And some of you guys, your teachers let you get away with talking way too much when you're in school. It's ridiculous, actually. They gotta learn how to handle you a little more. Okay. So, alhamdulillah, appreciate conversations I had during the break. Kids are kind of buzzed up with some juice boxes and maybe some Diet Coke now or whatever, so you have a little bit of energy going. So, if you have a question, think about your question, and I'm more than happy to take it. Bismillah. To summarize, the kids gotta do, I'm not saying the kids gotta do Dawah, but they gotta be thinking about it. And as the parents, the nice thing about young people, you don't have to think about how they have to do it. They can figure that out for themselves. Because one thing about the whole thing with teenage psychology and adolescent psychology, adolescents can actually be very, very creative because of the way that their minds work. And because they're risk averse, they will be willing to try to do new things. But they have to be pushed in that direction. And you can end this kind of dual life phenomenon that they got going on. Is there any questions?
And I have a microphone for those that want to ask a question. Question here.
How did you feel when you converted to Islam?
How did I feel when I converted to Islam? Well, it was a little bit of a long time ago. So, the way memory works is really different through the ages. Okay, prior to puberty, if you don't know this, memories are very, very good. And actually, the Muslim world figured this out before it was even studied by psychologists, because this is why Muslims, they have such an emphasis on learning to memorize the Quran from like ages 7 to 9, because those are actually the best ages for just pure memorization. Because before adolescence, the human mind just absorbs stuff. So kids, they can like remember the most random things that don't seem to matter. Then once you hit puberty, your mind starts getting more selective, only remembering what's important, what's not important, and old people are very selective with that. So it was very profound. Do you know what profound means? Do you know what profound means? Profound means like deep. Okay? If something's profound, it's almost like you have a feeling towards it that you can't even describe. It's so deep. Okay? And what you have to understand too, guys, when you discover Islam as a non-Muslim and you realize what it is, okay, it is the answer to the purpose of life. That's the whole thing with the kids and stimulation, okay? Like everyone's trying to entrap young people through simple stimulation. But can you not talk, please? That's okay. I don't need an excuse. Thank you. I'm not mad at you, okay? Please, you're just distracting me. That's all. What's your name? What's your name? Thank you, Zach. No matter what you do in life, if you sacrifice short-term fun for meeting responsibilities and hard work, it is the key to success in the long run. This is the whole conundrum of being young. Your mind wants so badly to just have fun, just have fun, just have fun. But the more you sacrifice having fun, the more you'll actually be able to experience life satisfaction later. Because if you just give in to fun now, you'll find yourself at a dead end when you're older and you'll feel like a loser. And what you thought was fun before, because your brain will have changed, will no longer be fun. And that's the whole thing. The way young people's minds experience fun is different than the way older people experience fun. Older people don't really experience fun. They experience various levels of satisfaction, which are connected to things pertaining to meaning in life. So providing for your family gives you a sense of meaning and accomplishment that feels good. And Islam ought to give you the ultimate type of long-term thinking, because ultimately, where is anyone going? Where are you going ultimately? You don't know the future, but there is one thing that is going to happen to you in the future that every single person knows. What is it? What's going to happen to every single one of us? Yeah, we'll be in front of Allah after we what?
Got a question.
MashaAllah. But we might not even be around for the trumpet being blown. Okay, what will happen to everyone eventually? Okay, we'll die. Very good, Zachariah. MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. So, making decisions that prepare you for that is the ultimate long-term thinking. And to answer your question, okay, that's part of what made it so profound. Because, non-Muslims, it's like their whole life is just trying to either figure out what their purpose is or distracting themselves from that thought process. It's either one or the other. So when you actually find the answer to that, and you actually look at it objectively, you realize it's the solution to like organizing human beings together. Because that's what Islam is also at a societal level. It's a system for organizing people and for bonding the human beings together. So, you know, like as a non-Muslim, you spend your life like wondering how that can be accomplished and, you know, should we do this or do we do that, all that type of stuff. When you realize there's actually a solution and answer to all those deep questions, it's just very profound. It's not something you can really describe or put into words. So I feel bad for people who don't get the chance to experience that. And as a young person, you know, sometimes Muslims, they do have their own way of like experiencing that in life. But you really should accept that. This religion is much more than just something your parents are telling you to do, or just something that makes you different from everyone else, or just something that makes it so you can't listen to Taylor Swift or something like that. It's much, much more than that. So don't let anyone ruin it for you. Boys, you better think of a question, okay? I'm sure you're all intelligent young men.
We'll take one from the.
You can think of a question that's going to contribute to the greater good.
How did you educate yourself on Islam?
How did I see the younger kids? They can only ask questions about a personal individual, okay? And parents too. Like I was saying to one parent, like you need to talk with your kids about your own like emotional experience growing up and as a Muslim and assimilating into society. Because you all came from societies where it's more collectivist, as they say. It's more about the group. You were probably raised in a way where you as an individual didn't matter that much. And that's all well and fine. And yes, your kids growing up here are spoiled and they're self-centered. That is how they are. But because of that, like Americans, they're more conditioned to be raised to think about someone's individual experience. So if you talk with kids about the difficulty you have when you go into work, how you feel self-conscious about your accent, things like that, whatever, that will like humanize you to the kids. And they won't think like you're trying to pretend that you're perfect or something. That's things a lot of Muslim kids go through. Okay, like mom and dad, they don't talk to them about these things, but they wanted them to do a whole lot of stuff, and they get mad at them, and they snap at them if they don't do it. So the kids start to think like, you know, as kids get older and their minds expand, they start to realize their parents' shortcomings. So a parent who is open about their own shortcomings, the kids actually feel closer to them and they respect them more. Whereas a parent who's not open and doesn't talk with the kid about their shortcomings, then the kids thinks like, Mom, Dad, you think you're perfect, but you're not, and I know it now. So then they start getting angry at you as they get older. All right, so I know I'm not answering your question right now. I'm just using the question to talk about something more interesting than how I learned about Islam. Okay, first thing, so 9/11 happened. Then the news stations started talking about Muslims and Islam, especially Fox News. So I learned a lot from what they were saying. Not that it was correct. Same with like radio stations. Okay, like radio stations were kind of like the Twitter of back then. There'd be stuff said about it then. Now actually what happened when after I graduated high school, a year after, I moved to downtown Minneapolis because I was going to MCTC, or Minneapolis College as they call it. Excuse me. And I was studying politics, so I was paying attention to what everyone in the media was saying about Muslims. It was all negative. But then I was actually around other Muslims because I lived on Oak Grove Avenue, if anyone knows it, just south of Loring Park, across the street from Minneapolis College, or MCTC. Now, down Oak Grove Avenue, it's all condos now, but on Nicollet and 15th Street, okay, down Oak Grove and 15th, down Nicollet and 15th Street, there was a Somali restaurant, a Somali coffee shop, and a little Somali run convenience store across the street. And then at the community college, I had a whole bunch of East African classmates as well. Now, these are all immigrants, okay? These are like your parents, or even your parents, your aunts and uncles. And I was very impressed with their behavior. Okay, like those East African immigrant students in my school, they took the class more seriously than kids like me who grew up in the suburbs or whatever. Because we were taught and raised that college is just a time where you party and have fun and this type of stuff. So I ended up like feeling embarrassed, like myself and for other kids, because like I remember taking a class on the U.S. government. And you had these immigrants who knew more about the U.S. government than kids who were born and raised and educated here. And then on that street corner, I was just very impressed with how the Somalis had community. Like you'd see people going in and out of the coffee shops and stuff. They all knew each other, all that type of stuff. And I said, well, there's something that most Americans don't have. So while I was hearing all this negative stuff about Muslims and Islam through news media, what I was seeing in real life was something like different. So I knew like there's got to be something to explain this. And whatever I'm hearing from the news media, there's got to be something more to it because it's just not adding up. Do you get what I'm saying? So then when I went to college, when I transferred to the University of Minnesota, I tried to take whatever classes I could that would teach me about the Muslim world. And even in those classes, honestly, I didn't learn that much about Islam, but I learned like some basic things. And I spent a whole year curious about what the Quran said. So, you know, like when you're in college going to school, you have a lot of reading to do. So you don't have time to read anything on your own. So when my semester ended in spring of 2007, I lived downtown. I went to college at the University of Minnesota campus, and I'd actually walk home when the weather was good because I hate taking the bus because I get motion sickness. So I'd walk through Cedar Riverside. You ever been to Cedar Riverside? You ever been there? Sure, you'll be there one day. And after I finished like my final of the semester, on my walk home, I went and got a translation of the Quran from a bookstore on Cedar Riverside there. Because I had been curious about reading it like my whole school year that year. Because I thought we should read it in front of one of the college classes because we're studying these countries where everyone's Muslim. It might make sense to like learn about this religion that everyone practices there, but universities are too smart for that. So then I read a translation of the Quran. So no one gave me dawah specifically, like verbally, but your parents' generation gave me dawah through their behavior. You understand? And that made me open-minded to learning about it. And then I just read the message of the Quran, and it speaks for itself from there. You get what I'm saying? Any other questions? Could ask some questions about, more along the topic of what we talked about.
Assalamu alaikum. This is a very nice talk and a very important discussion. So thank you for raising very good points there. I wanted to ask a question about dealing with just being isolated. I think we've all experienced when we go into certain places, schools, workplaces and whatnot, and we try to be ourselves. We try to adhere to what Islam has taught us. We oftentimes get so much negative feedback from others, and our deen teaches us not to take those things seriously and to push forward, and to be steadfast in our iman. But sometimes, especially when I was growing up, going to a very predominantly white, very non-Muslim school in the public over here, I've always had trouble just to overcome those challenges. Now that I'm older, I've learned a lot and I've gained a lot more experience, but to those who are in situations of feeling isolated, being one of the very few Muslim people in a particular school where there's no other Muslim folks or community to build off of, it can be incredibly lonely and isolating. So maybe, talking a little bit about that and kind of how to overcome those challenges, and maybe even hearing your experiences and what recommendations you'd give to both parents and children.
Well, look, it's a really good question. And, this is why I wanted to do this repeatedly, because what you're getting into is, the social emotional experience of being different at school, which is hard for anybody. And it's especially hard for young people, It's really hard. I mean, really, only people of certain personality types can deal with that, okay? They either have to have a high degree of stubbornness, which some really religious people do, or they have to be extremely introverted, which some religious people are. And I actually think if you look at the Muslim community more broadly, like the people who are really religious, they usually fall into one of those two categories. Like they're either very, very stubborn, so they don't care what other people say, or they're very, very introverted, so they don't mind like being alone. But most people don't fall into either of those categories. So, I mean, that whole social emotional experience, I mean, it's something that we have to unpack here. We have to name it and start supporting each other with one of it. Now, you're older now. Like, what year did you graduate high school? From where? St. Michael. Really? You're there. Is there, you're Somali? Romo. Is there Romos there, or like, a few? Yeah, I mean, that's especially tough in a small town. Now, honestly, like, most of the kids here, if they're going to Wayzata is extremely diverse. Okay, Osseo, I don't know if there's anyone from Osseo here, it's extremely diverse. You know, Minnesota has, the suburbs are diverse because there's actually state law that makes the available housing have to be at all different income levels in the suburbs here in the Twin Cities. So it's actually an advantage we have. Like I understand that experience, you know, but that was 10 years ago now that you graduated, and you know, even further before that. So there's more kids here now. You know, most of these kids actually, that's not their problem in the school. Most of them, their problem is they're too attached to a social group that is collectively not aware of the things we're talking about here today. So, I mean, honestly, especially like the Somali kids, that's the biggest thing they're struggling with. They're part of a social group at school that in itself has created a whole social culture that is completely around exhibiting manners that are anti-Islamic, because they're just given in, and no one was like there to interrupt it in this type of thing, you know. And then they start picking on one another to the one religious kid and that type of stuff. So especially amongst the boys, okay, especially amongst the boys, because the boys, especially in the Somali community, they really set the social agenda, okay? Because they have more independence. They're given more independence growing up, and they do the more daring things. And especially nowadays, they post it on TikTok, they post it on Snapchat. So all the Somali kids all around Minnesota, really, they're all talking about whatever the daring Somali boys are doing, and everyone's seeing it. And then the boys who aren't doing that, they're like self-conscious that they don't have that type of attention, and that puts a pressure on them to do those types of behaviors. So, and Somali boys too, you know, they are so emotionally attached to their friend group. Okay, most of them are not being very academically successful in school. So, like, they don't feel successful there from a young age. They start developing coping mechanisms in school to deal with that, which usually involves, like, getting assignments done by just copying from one another. Instead of, like, actually helping, like, the one kid who knows what to do, everyone will just copy off that kid. And they think they're hoodwinking the teachers growing up. The reality is the teachers know what they're doing, they let them get away with it, and it's too exhaustive a problem for them to deal with. So they just so you have the kids, especially the boys with Somalis, they're just being pushed through school, not doing very well, and everyone's turning a blind eye to these things going on. So they don't feel successful in school. So where do they feel successful? Their friend group creates a place where they can feel successful based on whatever criteria the friend group sets up. And that's entirely influenced by social media and whatever garbage gets into their minds and this type of stuff, and the ones who are the most socially assertive with that. So, you know, that's the thing with the Somali boys especially. Like, this type of turnaround, there has to be a group of them who chooses to do this collectively as a group. And they're going to support one another and say, we're not going to be like that. And we're going to, you know, even push back against that. And when we get that pushback from pushing back against it, we're not going to let that get the best out of us. Do you get what I'm saying? That's really more the issue, I would say, facing most of these kids than isolation. It's that these behaviors have gotten to the group level with them. And it's not just the boys. I'm not trying to pick on the boys. But, like, you know, I taught at a school as 90% Somali kids for 8 years. Most of what the girls are doing is talking about what they see the boys do on TikTok and Snapchat. That's what's mostly going on with them. And then the boys, they just got their own little world and you know, all this type of thing. And no one's really interrupting it. You know, so you guys have to decide. You have to make a conscious decision to be more mature and to not be a fool, because everyone's trying to make you into a fool right now. You know, as far as social isolation, I mean, parents can do a lot with social isolation if they have one-on-one talks with their kids, and they do this type of talk of their emotional experience. Parents always wonder of how to get kids to talk more about what goes on at school. Kids, they're not open about that. Okay, they come home from school, you ask them, what'd you learn at school? I don't know, nothing. What did you do at school today? I don't know. It's things like that, The way that you start to get kids to open up more about that as a parent is you talk more yourself about what your experience in school was. And you talk about what you remember thinking about. And especially talk about your insecurities, actually. Because most kids spend their day in school consumed by their insecurities. And a kid who's being isolated certainly feels like that. So, did you talk to your parents about that feeling growing up? Okay. And that helped you get through it, right? Yeah. So that's the big thing. And it's not easy. It's not easy if mom and dad are working 12 hours a day, or some are. Not easy if there's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 siblings, But there's ways to do it in groups, and you have to try. You have to make an effort. Thanks for the question.
Do you have any questions from the sister side?
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair, brother. Since you worked with the public school for 8 years, both we have our youth, boys and girls, and parents. For your experience, what advice would you give for, such you talk about a TikTok and those iPhones that roaming for our youth, for the grouping? So since we are as a family here, both parents and their kids, what advice would you give for the parents? And what advice would you give for the youth? And they are the future of this ummah, as you said at the beginning, that they're supposed to give a da'wah, but now this social media is affecting them. What do you have seen? And so what advice would you give it? And I know that you will do more sessions, but what is the takeaway today for that?
Well, the question was, what advice would I give for parents and kids, especially with social media influencing the kids so much? I could talk for quite a long time answering that question. Now, sister, are you asking me to say something specifically related to the phones and social media? Okay. Look, the UK, the Ministry of Education in the UK, they are banning phones in schools in the UK. There's plenty of research now. There is no excuse for schools to allow phones in the school, period. Okay? If the school, and I understand sometimes the schools do it because the parents want the kids to have the phone because we want this safety net of feeling like we can always text them, okay? And I'm not talking about if the school has a policy, okay, middle or high school, they have a policy, they might call it bell to bell, no cell. And they say the kids can bring the phone to school, but they can't have it out during class. 50, 60, 75% of the kids in that school, they're getting away with being on their phones during class. The school is saying that to you. The teachers are letting the kids get away with it. And everyone's just not saying anything about it because teachers at the end of the day, they want their job to just be a job that they can go to and not have to stress so much about. The schools should not be allowing kids to bring the phones to school, period. The rule should be if the kids have a phone at school, the school takes it from them, they keep it in the office until the parent comes and gets it. And you should advocate for your school to have the same policy. That way, at least the kids get some time away from screens. These kids are going to have like neurological issues and stuff as adults because of all the time spent on screens. My generation, the millennial generation, we probably had 8% of males from my generation who developed a video game addiction growing up, and they still have it. And they're in their 40s, and they're still addicted to video games. And many of them, they can't even function as adults. Now, they didn't have the video games in their pockets while they were at school. They just run to it right away after school. So this generation, where they have the screens in their pockets all day, probably 30, 40% of them, quite seriously, might not be able to function fully as adults when they grow up in the society. So you guys should know, the more you discipline yourself from not having the phone, it's probably the simplest thing you can do to get an edge on other people in your generation who you're in a competition with. But that's thing number one, okay? And a lot of parents want the kids to have the phone. You know, you want the comfort of being able to text them. You might need them for certain things. You really have to get past that and advocate for the schools that the kids are simply not allowed to have the phones. That way, they get some time away from at least that screen. They shouldn't have them learning on Chromebooks and iPads either. Those things do not enhance learning. Okay, it is all just the advocacy of the tech industry that has made the kids using tech nonstop in school. They should still be learning from books and paper. All right, and every district in this Twin Cities are going to have an issue with that. But that's thing number one. You know, especially too, like sometimes they'll cook up the worst things being on TikTok and stuff while they're at school. So, you know, the schools shouldn't allow them to have phones, period, because it's the only way to keep them off it. And then that way you will at least get control of it for some period of time. They won't be on it. When they are at home, there should be a defined window of when they are on their phones and when they are not. You can give them a 3, maybe 4-hour window. Maybe 1 or 2 hours before lunch, before dinner, an hour after dinner, something like that, okay? You really have to structure kids' lives growing up in this society. You really have to put your own individual structure into it in your house. 3 to 4 hours a day max, and you have to have their passcode, period. And after they're done with it, you have to look at the phone, and you have to go look into the messaging app. You have to go look into Snapchat. You have to go look into TikTok. You have to go look at their watch history, their messaging history, all that type of stuff. And some of the worst stuff the kids are getting into and get involved in, it's happening through the messaging apps. Either the native messaging app on the iPhone or on Snapchat. You have to know what is going on in those. And you don't know unless you have the passcode and you're looking at it regularly. And you have to keep them away from it. There is zero good reason anymore to have the kids have the phone all the time. You are only doing them a favor by putting the discipline structure in for them. The addiction that the phones cause, it is too much for young brains to handle. They literally can't handle it. So, you know, my generation, we grew up around secondhand smoke. Okay, people were smoking everyone. Everyone knew it was bad at the time, but they didn't do any laws or any things to change it. And now, you know, once our generation got older, then laws happen to change it. It'll be the same thing with these guys in the phones. It's causing their minds damage, and they will look back on us as adults and be like, oh, they failed us by not doing anything about it. And when these guys are 30, 40, 50, there will probably be laws, if not in the country, at least in certain localities, that restrict kids from being able to use phones until a certain age. That is probably how it'll play out. So that's the biggest thing. Just restrict them from having the phone. What can they do instead? They can read books. Okay, it'll take them a while to get used to it in the beginning, but reading books is a good replacement for it. You can have family time. You know, all kinds of different things. But you have to structure their lives fairly rigidly, and especially with the phone. Like advice for the kids with the phone, you can't really give the kids advice about it because the phone overtakes them, and TikTok overtakes them, and Snapchat overtakes them. Okay, you're talking about the most advanced technological minds in the world have put literally billions of dollars into figuring out how to psychologically manipulate these kids through the apps, with everything down to how the algorithms work to the specific size and color of the red dot notification. All of that is studied through trial and error to see what's going to be more addictive. So it's hard to give the kids advice with the phones because it overtakes them. And if you guys are not aware, if adults are not aware, especially Somali kids, they have a toxic culture, especially here in the Twin Cities on social media, period. They have kids every day posting themselves, doing illegal things, fighting one another, showing off this way and that, doing all kinds of awful haram things I don't even want to mention. And every kid if they're not looking at it, there's at least social pressure at school then to know about it and to be talking about it. They have a purely toxic culture on there. And everyone needs to have a sense of urgency about interrupting it. And when I do my training with schools, I tell all the teachers this. Every teacher I train, I tell us about this, specifically about the Somali kids. It's a toxic culture they have on social media. You are only doing them a favor by restricting them away from it and getting them away from it. Whatever benefit there is on being on those devices, it's extremely outweighed by the harm that has developed on it. And that's just how it is. I hope that helps. Sorry about answering.
We have one more from.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zakaria.
So,
So my question refers to what you said about how the youth today, the problem is like the groups that we are in, how their attitude and characteristics are not very Islamic. And the question is like, how can you introduce more Islamic characteristics in those groups from like one of us, but not in a way where you are attacking them or like scolding them, because nowadays you can't, if they feel attacked, they won't listen to whatever you're saying.
well, first of all, it's a beautiful question, Zachariah. So Jazakallah khair for answering it. How old are you? Look, a lot of time, this is a thing for kids in the group, and you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that, correct? Okay, like kids have a lot of care for one another, okay, in different ways. Like they do genuinely really care about one another. They also really care about what one another thinks. Something that is a little hard for teenagers to accept, because there is actually a lot of people like you who would like to turn this type of thing around, but don't know how. And then you immediately attach it to turning other people around, because you want your friends to, you want things to go good with them. But, you know, like teenagers, like you as a teenager, you're not responsible for turning any other 18-year-old around. You get what I'm saying? And that's only even more so true with a 15, 16-year-old. That is too much of a burden for you to take on. And you owe it to yourself to develop your own life and develop your own character in your own life, that you have to free yourself from really taking on the worry of what happens to others. And you have to understand that you're not in a position yet to influence them. You get what I'm saying? That is why, like when I was talking, I specifically used the phrasing, positioning yourself to give dawah to people. Because you can't just roll out of bed and give dawah to someone. You have to be relationship-wise positioned to give dawah to them. So like if you focus on yourself, okay, try to find a friend who you're going to support one another and really being more religious. So then you're a little less isolated and you guys can do things and develop together. Develop in religion, develop in, building skills and doing whatever, like whatever, being a healthy person. You focus on developing that together. The peers who you are around who aren't behaving the way we'd like, you might not ever be able to influence them. You won't be able to influence them now. But one of two things will happen if you put yourself on a good path. Number one, your friends who you're around now, they might take it personal if you start isolating yourself from them, and they might even give you a hard time from that. But years later, when they've gotten themselves down some type of rut, or they have some type of emotional issue going on, and they are looking to turn their lives around, and they need help, and they need advice with this, or that, you will be who they come to at that time. Because they'll see, Zachariah came from the same place as me, but he's turned out differently. And while we were busy doing all this, and that, he was making other choices. So what was it that he cultivated inside himself? Because now I want that. Now that I'm grown up and I'm in this rut, or I'm addicted to this or whatever. Do you get what I'm saying? You might find that. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by His will, He will make it so you're in a position to influence another younger person when you're older. Do you get what I'm saying? So it might not be the 18-year-olds who are your same age, but you might find yourself, you're 24, 25, or even older. And Allah has put you in a position where now you can help someone. Do you get what I'm saying? So that's more what you have to think. And if you look at the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, dawah is a long-term project. It's actually more than a lifelong project, because the dawah continued after his life. The spread of Islam from one end of the earth to the other, most of it happened after he died. And it began for him even before he first received revelation. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the deeds most beloved to Allah are those that are small, but done consistently. So, developing a routine in life and habits in life where you are consistently making the right choices, consistently doing the right thing, that really is the key. And that will bring you things that you can't imagine. So like what you're expressing there, this is what I see from young people who want to do the right thing. They have this urgency about helping their friends like immediately. But there's an extent to which, I don't want to say you have to let go of that, but you have to understand that it's not the best thing for you to make a priority right now at this point in your life. Yourself is the best thing to make a priority right now. And then your next closest friend. Do you get what I'm saying? Who's on the same page as you. Yeah. And whatever you do, don't get into heated arguments with them. Whatever you do, okay? They pick on you or whatever, they ask you. Actually, when kids are getting bullied, sometimes counselors will do this with kids in the school. There's like kind of some specific exercises they do to teach the kid how to be non-reactive when someone bullies them. Because when a kid is being a bully, what they're looking for is a reaction. So even a negative reaction gives them power over you, and they win what they're trying to do. So a big mistake that young people make is someone bullies them and they hit back and they get into something heated. Like you've already lost once you've done that. Because from that guy's perception, he triggered you. He got you all worked up. So he won. So when you separate from other kids, it's a difficult decision to make. It really is. You don't have to be explicit about it necessarily, but kids will start noticing, hey, you're not coming to the same place anymore, you're not participating on the same message boards, you're not posting like you used to or whatever. They'll notice that eventually. You just need to be calm and emotionally neutral when you explain to people well, I'm just not doing that anymore. I'm trying to, and their reaction isn't up to you. Their reaction isn't up to you. But thank you for that question. It's really the best question.
Any questions from the sisters?
How does it feel to be a part of Islam?
It feels like the best thing. Thank you for the question. It was wonderful. How does it feel to you? It feel good? Allahu Akbar. Any other questions?
What advice do you have for the kids to deal with the peer pressure?
Well, actually, the better advice is for the parents with the peer pressure. Okay, peer pressure is really difficult for kids, and adults have grown out of that, and they get disconnected from the type of emotions that kids experience with that. So they don't empathize with it well, because it's those kids are being dumb. Why are you doing what those kids are doing? Just don't do it. I think too, to understand, young people, they actually experience time as taking longer than adults do, than older people. The older you get, the faster time goes, which is literally because your mind doesn't hold on to as many memories. So that 6-hour school day feels very, very long to the kids. And so they're 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, 9-10 months out of the year. It is their life. So how are you going to ask them to not care what other people think there, and then send them into it day after day after day after day? You can't ask them to they do care. That's what I'm saying. What we have to cultivate in the kids is that caring for those other people means practicing the self-discipline that comes along with being a Muslim. And even though they will hurt you in the beginning with it, in the long run, if you hold on to it, you're going to do something better for them. So this type of mission that Islam actually is and is supposed to be, we have to be reminding them to it daily on. And if you feel like you weren't able to do that same thing as a parent, that's okay. you can talk with your kids about that and talk about how they have an opportunity to do what you didn't. Kids can become better than their parents. They can. They can even be motivated by that. But you have to be like real with them. Okay, you can't like give them the feeling like you're acting like you're perfect or something, that type of thing. They can't get that impression. They have to like feel like you're being emotionally real with them. So many parents, they feel like it's going to make them look weak if they talk about their insecurities to their kids. The opposite is true. The opposite is true. It makes the kids empathize with you more. Kids don't empathize with adults easily. They don't know what it's like to be an adult. They don't understand all the stress with a job and family. They have no idea about that. So they don't empathize with adults well. So you have to be like explicit about your own emotional experience, your own insecurities. When you are that way, they see that their own insecurities aren't something like weird about them. It's something normal. And it's something that you can cope through. And it makes them empathize with you. And that makes them want to do things for you more, as opposed to like developing like this kind of adversarial, we gotta hide things from mom and dad type of thing. You also too, you do need to try to like, you should have dinner as a family every day. That is very important. You should try to get kids to talk about what happened at school during that. If you don't know how to do that, there's two things you can do. First, you talk more about yourself and things that happened to you in the past at dinner. So you are modeling self-reflection while you're at the dinner table. Okay? That will help the kids take it on. Secondly, especially if the kids are younger, when you ask them about school, don't ask just some general question like what happened at school today or what'd you learn in school today, because the choices of where to go with that are too much. And that question overwhelms the kids, and then they just say, oh, no. You have to ask like a simple, very concrete question that's easy to answer. And if nothing else, ask a yes or no question and just get things going with that. Or ask them a question and give them two choices to answer with. I've been doing that with the kids. That's how you start eliciting a response. So then they start getting into the habit of responding and that type of thing. And you can let the kids know that you do want to know what's going on at school. And you can tell them that even if there's something going on that you might not like or you might seem shocking, that it's okay for them to tell you about it. And then when they do tell you about it, it'll take a while, but when they do tell you about it, you can't freak out at them. You have to like stay calm when they tell you about it. You can't get all worked up and stuff, because then your actions are saying something different than what your words say. You know what I'm saying?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa barakatuh.
My name is Zakaria as well.
What's your name?
Zakaria.
Zakaria, mashallah. 3 of them.
My question was bouncing off what you said earlier about the Somali culture, and one thing I've noticed for a while is like I'm not trying to say it comes from our parents, but at the same time, I also want to say like we are like if we're home all the time, obviously we are what we are at home. So essentially, like we copy our parents at the end of the day, and plus we develop on our own. So my question is like, can you say like who we are today is also built or stems from our parents?
Who you are today stems from your parents? Well, I mean, you're genetically from your parents, so your personality, anyone's personality is going to be a mix of different traits of their parents' personality, So that's inevitable. And, I mean, what are you getting at with your question? Okay, so you asked, like, repeat the question. Just the question part. Is the way you are because of your parents? Is that what you asked?
I'm blanking because I had read it earlier than, yeah. I forgot what my question was. My bad.
I mean, look, I tried to explain this whole dynamic. Look, if your parents grew up in Somalia, okay, like, again, they could let a 10-year-old boy out the door and trust that everyone he's going to come into encounter with is going to reinforce what they want reinforced upon him. And if he gets out of line, they're going to correct him. You could trust that. So you can't parent that way here. So, I mean, how do you parent in a society that demands completely different things than the way you were parented? It's an extremely difficult situation. You know what I'm saying? Probably a more stressful situation than their parents might have had, depending on what they went through. So parents are very stressed out. And, you can't blame them for not having all the skills of what it takes to be like an effective parent in America. The Somali parents are really doing their best. You listening to me? Listen. They're really doing their best, I promise you. Okay, I've dealt with parents for a long time. They are really doing their best. I lived in Saudi Arabia for 3 years, so I was an immigrant when I was there. Still living in that country, you're privileged if you have an American passport, because people will cater to you. But just the things I had to worry about there, that I didn't know about, like the lack of know-how that you have. It's an extremely difficult situation. So, my advice to young people is just be forgiving to your parents, okay? It's easy to try to blame your parents, especially as you get older. You can, the thing I was going to say about the teenage mind. I don't know if you were here when I was talking about how, as it develops, it gets better at interconnecting things, okay? So when you're a teenager, you can have like more dynamic and deeper thoughts than you could like a year ago all the time. And those types of thoughts like hit teenagers as a really big deal because it's something new to them. One of those things is you can see your parents in a different way. So before puberty, you mostly see your parents as like, they love you. There's just this sense that they are like the important authority. You don't want them to be mad at you. You want them to be happy with you. And it's just like that. Then as your mind develops, okay, you can see all these shortcomings that your parents have. And they're just people like anyone else. You can start to see that. So some teenagers, they like make too big a deal about that, and they turn that into anger against their parents. Because they can see the point that they're criticizing, but they can't empathize with the broader context that their parents live in and have had to go through. And you won't know that, and you'll never fully know that. You won't know what it's like to be a parent until you are their age. And people experience it all the time, that they had these criticisms about their parents, and then they have kids, their kids grow up, and they're 40 years old, and somehow, without even realizing it, they find the exact same things that came out of their parents' mouth to them coming out of their own mouth to their own kids. And they don't even realize that was happening until they're actually saying the words. Even if your parents spoke to you in a different language. That is a very common life experience. And a lot of times it's not until that moment where you can really empathize and realize where your parents were coming from. So, follow Islam. Islam teaches you to be very merciful to your parents. And it's difficult for old people to change because of these things, literally with things concerning how the brain works. It's difficult for old people to change. So, like wanting parents to be different or anything, it really won't get you very far because they can change, but it's very difficult for them. So be obedient to your parents, be empathetic to them, and be patient with them. And you will be pleased with that in the long run. And don't get wrapped up in blaming them, okay? We can blame the parents all day. It's not that they're faultless, but they probably had a more difficult life than anyone who grew up here. So what's the point in getting into blaming them? I don't see the point in it personally. So that's my advice. Be empathetic to them. If you have some anger towards them, it's natural, but you will do yourself more by letting go. Okay, be a forgiving person like that. Any other questions? Yes.
There's a question here.
The best way to what? To end bad friendships. It's a really good question.
One came in as a written question.
Sure.
As an immigrant parent, I feel sometimes that the school districts are not welcoming, how can we change that, especially when we have a challenging child?
Yeah, the school districts are not great with immigrant parents. So I'm sorry for that. If you're here, well, we can talk specifically. Now, look, I did put my book I have a training program together. Because, look, the education system, it's an opportunity for us to, educate people in a comprehensive way, okay? And sometimes we need to begin with that, okay? The values that we have for the kids, where the parents are coming from. It shouldn't be the burden of every individual parent to have to teach about that to the school district, okay? Every teacher has professional pressure to learn about diversity. So I put a program together to teach about this. And a lot of times that really can help in the beginning, because it allows the schools to see you in a whole different new light, okay? If there is some specific situation, if you have a special needs kid or this type of thing, and you'd like for me to engage with your school district as a consultant on your behalf, I have done those types of things. I do those types of things with parents across the state. So you can reach out to me individually, and we can do that. This sister over here, she asked, what is the best way to end bad friendships? It's a really good question. How old are you? 10. 10 and a half. It is hard in school. It is hard because you're around people every day, I don't think it always makes sense to just proactively say, hey, I don't want to be your friend anymore. You don't want to say it like that. But you can sort of gradually withdraw from a person. And then they might notice that. And when they notice it, they might bring up the point explicitly. When they bring up the point explicitly, then you have to do something called drawing a boundary with someone. Okay? So drawing a boundary with someone is like a skill that takes a lot of maturity to do. So you can do it, and you can try it. It might not go well when you first do it, because there's some people who are 56 years old, they don't know how to do this. Okay? But drawing a boundary with someone entails calmly saying to them, look, I care about you as an individual, but when I'm around you, I feel it's not good for me. And you might be more specific at that for whatever reason. So, that's why I'm choosing not to be around you so much. Choosing not to be by you at the playground or sit by you at lunch or whatever, So it's not that I don't, it's not that I don't care about you, but for me, this is what I have to do. And a 10-year-old will probably get emotional back at you. They might say, well, you're not my friend anymore, or something mean like that, So, because a lot of times the person who you have a toxic relationship with, they're not in a good state themselves. So when you draw a boundary with them, that poor state that they're in starts to come out. So you can't take that personal, which is hard for people to do. But you have to, whatever they say back, you have to just try and stay calm with it. That's the best I can tell you. Okay.
We have one more question from.
Sure.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
Walaikum assalam wa barakatuh.
My name is Abdurrahman Sharif. I have a question on behalf. I'm Quran teacher, so I do have a bunch of students who give me hard time, but alhamdulillah they become better than before. One of the questions that they were always asking me is, what's the ruling of wrestling inside the masjid?
The ruling?
Yes.
Well, I'm not a faqih, so I'm not someone to ask about.
Yeah, I know that, but if you can answer this question in a perspective of a parent or a teacher, as you serve in public school.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a funny thing because I actually talk about this issue when I do my training, and I actually even write about it in chapter 5 of my book, because I have so many parents or teachers who ask me about the kids play wrestling, and it's not just Somali kids, but other places where they have lots of Arabs, same thing, you know. So this is the thing with it, because, you know, like wrestling was a recreational activity that the Prophet and his companions would do, you know. And you know, the weekend schools are difficult for the kids. You're taking their weekend away. You know, they want to be having fun and stuff. And most people, like yourself, working in the masajid on the weekends, they have this sense like, okay, we have a break, let the kids get some energy out. And then the masjid is conducive for wrestling because it's a nice carpet open area, so why not, you know? So, like, what I tell teachers in public schools is they have to talk to the kids, because the kids will take that behavior into school. They will play fight a lot. And this really stresses the schools out, with the Somali kids, with the boys especially, okay? Like, they're always play fighting. And the teachers in the public school, when they do that, they freak out at them more than you do on the weekend. So for the kids, this is part of like what creates like bad relationships with their teachers from the beginning. Because they'll be doing that, it's like we're just having fun. This lady freaks out at them, and then it's like, what's your problem, lady? You know, like, we were just doing this in the masjid over the weekend. No one freaked out at us like that, you know? So it's a whole thing for them. So what I tell those teachers to do is they have to sit the kids down and talk to them about liability, okay? Because that is the issue in the schools of why they cannot allow play fighting. Because the kids will say, well, I don't care if I get hurt. The other kid will say, I don't care if I get hurt. So, like, you can't just say to them, someone could get hurt. But the issue is that, like, a teacher or a principal could lose their license if someone gets hurt in a certain way while they're at school. So there's, like, this systemic kind of level to it that you have to explain to kids. And kids understand that stuff. So in the masjid, I'm not sure that it's exactly the same. And look, actually, you know, I was in Long Island last week. I was in New York City last week, training some Islamic private schools in behavior management, and I visited a masjid in Long Island. It was mostly like Bengalis. And this brother, who was the director there, very smart brother, him and his family, they traveled, after he studied in Bangladesh, they traveled to Sri Lanka, spent some time there, South Africa, and London, to study Muslim communities in non-Muslim societies. And they went down around to different Islamic centers. And what they found consistently, communities where they were keeping the kids more religious, what they were doing, like Islamic studies and Quran and Duksi and whatever, they were doing it after school during the week. They weren't doing it on the weekends. We have that happening in a few places where there's charter schools where they bring the people right in. But this is actually something that our community, because are you teaching on the weekends or during the week?
I currently teach weekend, but before I used to teach weekdays.
Yeah, like this is something that we really need to think, because it is honestly hurting the kids having their weekends taken away through their whole childhood. It is honestly hurting them. Some of them, it's making them hate Duksi. They have negative associations with learning the Quran, the religion, all that type of stuff. So like if we start doing it after school, it doesn't have to be as long, but an hour, 90 minutes after school, they're already in more of an academic mode because they've been at school. You know, it's more consistent, and a little bit that's more consistent is better than long swaths on the weekend. And we can keep their weekends alive so they can actually have fun on the weekends. So this is kind of a broader issue that I think this community, we really need to think about implementing, how we make it work. Another thing too, if you guys don't know, in Minnesota there is a state law that schools have to excuse kids for up to 3 hours a week from school for religious education. Meaning that, you know, if you put your kid in school and they're absent a certain amount of time, you could get in trouble for neglecting their education. There's education neglect laws. And the kid could be put in an issue where like you weren't in class enough for credit, this type of stuff. But if you tell the school that they are doing religious learning at a religious institution, that you're taking them out of school for that, then the school has to allow that. And the kid will, they still have to make up any work that they missed, but they can't be penalized for it as far as their attendance, or like as far as how it might affect credits or this type of thing, and the school has to accommodate it. So, you know, 3 hours a week, like potentially all the kids, we could take them out of school 30 to 45 minutes early every day. And we could, you know, we have these transportation services that some brothers own and stuff. We could have them shuttled to the masjid. You could work this out with the school. And so I'm saying if you do that, then their learning day during the week doesn't get so long too, because that's a whole thing, you know?
Yeah.
But like the community really needs to like think about structuring the Islamic education a little differently in general, specifically in this, because like it's hard to ask the kids to be cooped up so much on the weekends. It's just hard.
Yes. So,
If you want to learn some specific behavior management techniques, this type of stuff, what masjid you work here?
this message, yeah. But for the weekend, the weekdays program, I would like to share it with you. So,
Sure.
It's not here in Minnesota, but in California, San Diego.
Yeah.
I was the head of teacher over there. We try to create and design weekdays program, which is 21 hours a week,
Yeah.
5 days a week. 5 days a week, yeah. 3 days in weekdays and weekend. We were doing 3 hours a day. In weekend we do 6 hours with break of 3 hours or 2 hours and a half.
6 hours Saturday and Sunday?
Saturday, Sunday, 6 hours. 3 hours morning and 3 hours afternoon.
So the kids spending 12 hours of their weekend in Duxie.
Yes.
I mean, you know.
But we do have a break in the afternoon, like between Dhuhr and Asr is whole break. Anyways,
Look, you know, the whole thing about this,
Yeah.
like when the kids are in elementary school,
yes.
okay, common practice in elementary school, they'll have what they call a morning meeting, okay, where they put all the kids, they sit in a circle, and a part of that morning meeting is every kid shares something, okay? On Monday, they always ask them to share what they did over the weekend. And our kids, like Duxie, it's like, okay, going back to the isolation thing, like the other kids in school don't know what Duxie is, and they don't even know how to explain it.
Yeah.
So what the kids do, Monday, they'll be asked to share what they did over the weekend. They're like too embarrassed to say they were at Duxie, or they just don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
So they will like lie and make up that they did this other thing
That's it.
for the sake of surviving there. And they feel insecure about the fact that everyone else was doing all these fun things or whatever over the weekend, and then what were they doing?
Yeah.
Like we can't keep taking the kids' weekends away.
Yes.
And we have to put something in place, because they won't do that with their kids. They're not going to do that with their kids when they have kids. And if we don't have another system in place, what are they going to do? They might have kids who don't come to the masjid at all. I mean, this is what happens to immigrant communities in American society. That's why all these Catholic churches that were open 100 years ago, now they're closed. Because over the generations, it wears away. We don't want that.
Just a heads up, Maghrib is at
Yeah, sure. I don't mind going till the event time.
9:10.
9:10, maybe that's a little. I don't know.
I think let's just take maybe 2 more questions.
Sure.
Then we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mahmoud. I'm a parent. I have the question I have is school should be neutral, and everywhere you go in school you see the rainbow flag.
Yeah.
Sometimes the teachers are wearing the pins, and that's un-Islamic. And how do we, as a parent, how do we address that?
Yeah, the schools aren't neutral. They're not neutral at all. Okay.
That's what they're supposed to be, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's complex. Okay, traditionally, under the ideals of a traditional liberal education, you're kind of supposed to be neutral in that you're supposed to look at all different opinions, this type of stuff. Now, if you get like the American Psychological Association to create some validation of having these activities and having these flags is going to help some kids who are at risk emotionally, then you've maybe created a professional justification for them to do that. Do you get what I'm saying? So, like, not everyone in the school system is seeing this through the prism of it like being an ideological battle. They're seeing it like through the prism of it being treating the social emotional needs of kids. Now, the reality of it, that's not what's really going on. There is an agenda behind it. American public schools are not neutral places. They are places of social advocacy. They have been that for a long time. They're places where it's implicit that you are going to advocate for yourself and what you want and all that type of stuff. Okay? First people to really do that in this society were the Jews, Jewish people who immigrated here in large number in the early 20th century, and especially after World War II. Go look through the school curriculum of any school. you will find so much reading about World War II and the Holocaust. They will have the book Night by Eli Wiesel. They will be reading the Diary of Anne Frank. Okay, all throughout K through 12, there is learning about the immigration experience of Jews and the experience of the Holocaust and the fallout of that and all that type of stuff. And literature and novels written by Jewish people. That didn't just happen. That was from the advocacy of Jewish people who came to this society. They went to the schools and said, hey, you should do this book. You should teach the kids about this. Oh, you don't know about that? Let us teach you about it. Here, we will host a seminar in our synagogue. We'll come to your school. We'll teach you about it. We'll even create entire curriculum around you being able to teach this. So now we're making your job easy for you because you can teach about this lesson, and here, we've done all the work for you. Here it is. That is how all that got in the American curriculum. What the LGBT community did, beginning in like the 80s, they just did the same thing. They just did the same thing. And there's millions of dollars behind it. So they've got the books, they've got the lesson plans written out, they've got they do all the work for the schools and say, here, do this. And now we've done your lesson planning for you, we've done your we've done the job for you. So our problem in the Muslim community, we don't have people in education. We don't have people in education who can do that type of work, and we're not doing it ourselves. So we have to advocate the same way. We have to educate people about Muslims, have to educate people about Islam. We have to say, we want this book, we want that book, all that type of stuff. That is what we can do. As far as like some details about what's going on with the LGBT stuff in schools, there will be some legal battles fought over it. You have a right here in Minnesota to not have your kid undergo any curriculum stuff that you don't want them to, that you object to. You have that right. But that doesn't necessarily stop the school from putting some flag up in the classroom or the teacher wearing a pin. It doesn't necessarily stop that, And, too, like, I'm not saying we shouldn't exercise that right. We should exercise that right. But, like, sometimes it puts the kids in a certain situation when we withdraw them from those classes. I'm not saying to not do it, but that can set them up for being isolated and being singled out and being picked on. And whether or not the school is going to excuse them in a proper way, you have to plan with them with that as well. And really what works best is if they're going to be learning about that stuff on a specific day, which you have a right to know about in advance. You have a right to know about it in advance, and you have to assert that. It's really best for the kids to not be there at all on those days. So you plan ahead with the school, so you're home, and you don't have the kids go to school at all those days. Because sometimes the kids get caught up in these things. It's like, oh, what? Your mommy and daddy don't want you to take this class or whatever? They'll get picked on that way and that type of thing. And that's the whole aspect of it that we have to tend to. But look, I have had schools and teachers who I have done my training, and then they realize the sensitivities about this, and they have taken the pride flag down from their classroom. I've had teachers who've done that. Like, you can solve these things through education. And just in general, we have to work to build the education capacity in our own community. Because we don't have enough educators. We don't have great resources in this community because relative to other communities, we're a low socioeconomic status Muslim community. But that is changing. That is changing. So we have to support Islamic private schools. It's a long-term project. But anyway, I put this program together to make this kind of education easy for parents. I have a program that teachers can do online, or I can come to the school, have a book they can read, because that's what we have to do, because that's what everyone else has done. And teachers have to learn about diversity to get relicensed, okay? There's all kinds of professional injunctions, legal injunctions even, for parents to respect the home culture of their families and to respect diversity and to learn about all that. But what that is going to mean to the people in the school depends on whoever pushes the hardest and whoever educates the hardest and who makes things easy for them. So like in this program, I don't just teach them about background information about Muslims and Islam, but I also give them specific books that they can use. On my website, I have specific lessons that they can use, all that type of stuff. Okay? And again, like other communities, they've literally had millions of dollars put behind developing that stuff. So where is the same thing in the Muslim community? And even at a national level, honestly, the leaders of the Muslim community should be held accountable for this. Because why have we been in this country now in solid numbers for 20, 30 years, and no one thought to do this before, when it's wide open in the education system? You know, what is the plan for educating the society more broadly about Islam if we're not going to use the education system for that? We don't have to ask them to convert to Islam, but we can explain what the religion is in terms of our needs as community members. And their jobs are dependent on us. This is the big thing Muslims have going to us. We have lots of kids in the school. If we take our kids out of these schools tomorrow, massive budget cuts. Schools would have to close. No school wants that to happen. So it's actually a point of social leverage that we have that we need to exercise. So we'll get more into this issue because I know people want to talk about it. I don't know if you're one of the on the group from ASIO, because I know there's some specific things going over there. But I'm in contact with them. I've been talking to their diversity department. I've done 3 different trainings with their diversity department and the administration of ASIO High School. So I'm making progress with them, and inshallah I'm meeting with the principal of ASIO High School, who was actually one of my teachers when I was in high school, believe it or not. So I actually know her from going back. I'm meeting with her in July to discuss training for the staff in August. There's progress being made. Okay.
Last one?
Sure, yeah.
All right.
Sorry if I come off a little irritable. I don't mean to be that way. Sometimes you come off that way. You're doing this.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh.
I know, like, our sheikh here, he talked about, like, how, like, parents, like, confront this, like, situation, but, like, how do, like, us, like, especially me, like, going into a bigger school, and they're gonna have a bigger community there, like, how do, like, us kids, like, confront the teacher about it in a respectful manner, and how do we confront, like, the peer, like, their community when they come at us, and, like, how do we talk to them?
Yeah, I mean, I know that's difficult, first of all, okay, and it's unfortunate that you guys are in that situation. And more adults, we need to talk about this aspect with the adults in those buildings. So the more that you actually just report that type of thing happening to us like you just did, it's actually important, okay? Like documenting instances where kids are trying to push stuff, other kids are trying to push stuff on you, or pressuring you to think a certain way or feel a certain way. We actually do need to document those types of things a little bit, okay? So we have like written documentation of when this has happened, and then we can quantify it a little bit. Look, the thing is, when you're in confrontational situations with someone, one way or the other, the biggest thing you want to start exercising is just trying to stay calm, okay? And controlling your emotions, which is hard in the situation. And there was a muhaddith from Afghanistan from the 9th century who goes by the name Ibn Hibban, rahimahullah. He wrote a great book called The Gardens of the Pious and the Meadows of the Virtuous. It's a great book for life advice. He said in there, that regret from silence is better than regret from speaking. So you might have a situation where you got confronted with something and you stayed silent, and you think about it later and you regret having not said something because you think, I could have said this, this, and that. That is better than having a situation where you got confronted with something and you said something, but later you regretted what you said. Do you understand what I'm saying? So staying silent is always a better choice. And when you reflect on it later, I could have said this, this, and that. Well, a similar situation will come up sometime in your life. And then you can say the right thing. But in these confrontational situations, like exercising staying under your own emotional control is the most important thing. And look, as far as like convincing other people to think something different, we can do that. But really, it doesn't begin with these controversial pinpoint issues. So as Muslims, we have to strategize. How do we create a platform? How do we create situations where the non-Muslims can learn about Islam, understand our ideological way of looking at the world, but learn about it from the ground up. So it's not like we're always backtracking about these controversial situations. So you can always say to someone, look, I disagree with you. For me to explain why, to really explain why, it might take some time. If you want to listen to me tell you about that, maybe we can schedule a time for that. Or I'd be happy to meet with you after school sometime. Or we can get coffee together sometime. Or I can bring you to, if you'd like to visit my masjid, my mosque sometime. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of times the heat of the moment isn't the best time. Because when you're in the heat of a moment, people, they're not even in a frame of mind where they're going to receive anything from you because they're emotional. With your teachers, have your parents tell the school to have them do my training. Okay? It'll help, seriously. Okay, Jazakumullahu khairan. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your patience with me. Listen to me talk so much, and ask Allah to make this a benefit and to forgive us for any wrongdoing.
Amin. Jazakallah khair.